Are the tariffs going to come in a week, tomorrow, a month, a year?
Do I tell the seller that tariffs aren't going to make a difference? Or should I say, like, it's probably not going to end well if they actually go into place?
If these things do come in, we're going to see prices drop.
It's actually the single largest drop in median prices we've seen in like 18 months. The day of inauguration, it's almost a straight line down as far as home search inquiries goes.
If new house builds go up and we don't get houses being built, are we right back into the housing crunch?
The biggest effect that we would see is, of course, the cost of construction. The cost of housing just cannot get a break.
We are tariff-fied.
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
Welcome back to the show. This week's guest is Dan Wurtele from the Vancouver Life Real Estate Group with eXp Realty and the Living in Vancouver YouTube channel. Dan, I always enjoy having guests on the show that I actually don't know personally because I get to meet them for the first time when I'm interviewing them. But welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, you're right. I guess we didn't even really have much of a preamble. We're meeting each other for the first time here. So excited to be a part of it and join you guys today. I'm obviously a fan of your channel and have been watching it regularly. So it's great to be a part of it today.
Thanks, man. So give us a bit of a background. So I know a lot of people that watch our content have probably at least seen your face in a YouTube thumbnail or watch your videos already. But those that don't know, can you give me kind of a background on just how long you've been in real estate, how long have you been doing the content, and what is your channel like maybe versus what we do over here?
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate the question. So I've been in real estate licensed as of this upcoming April for 8 years. I partnered with my colleague Ryan Dash about 6 years ago, and that's when we created our team, the Vancouver Life Real Estate Group. And we're now a team of 6, and we cover the Lower Mainland, essentially helping people buy, sell, and invest in real estate here. We've also really embraced the multiplex sort of legislation that's come into be in our province last year. And we've got like a project marketing and sales division of our group. And we're launching a 6-plex later this month, a 4-plex in summer and so forth. And, as a sales team, I wanted to, share that in 2024, we hit President's Club, which means, we sell in the top 1% here in GVRD. And I guess why that's important to share is that, what it's like, Tom, when you're so integrated into an industry and you do a high level of activity, it really helps your clients stay ahead of the trends, the strategies, the networks that exist within your marketplace. And then, to discuss our channel. So we created our YouTube channel 4 years ago. And we release content every single Saturday morning at 6 o'clock Pacific. Never missed a single week ever in 4 years. And I guess it's very much topical in the sense of current relevant information that has to do with Vancouver housing. Like, we're very niche in Vancouver specifics. And sure, we'll look at micro and macro economics and touch on some national elements that we find interesting that our viewers might want. But it's really about providing a framework and guidance ultimately about considering what's happening in the viewers' lives within Vancouver real estate, buying, selling, investing, getting out, getting in, whatever it is. So,
and let me guess, comments are always positive, and everyone's pretty happy about overall real estate prices in Vancouver. Is that about right?
It's all rainbows and unicorns over here for sure. There's never negativity. It's quite fascinating, right? Like, it'd be so easy just to create a channel that was, bearish on real estate, and you get all these crazy
we'd grow
views,
faster.
But 100% you would. Yeah. Yes, I'm sure we all have examples of it, but ultimately, we're trying to be as transparent as possible so people can just make educated decisions. And you're right. Like, when the market goes down and we talk about it tanking, for some reason the views go up. And then when the market just happens to go up, or there's a positive element within the landscape, there's a lot of hate in the comments. But whatever, we don't do it for the comments. We do it to help some people that truly do get value out of it.
I feel like there's also just trends, like Steve, you were showing me not that long ago, because we track obviously like our views on this show, and sometimes it's crazy. And I'm like, I thought that episode was okay, but I don't think it was 2 times better than the last one. And then we record one, we're like, that was awesome, and nobody watches it. And Steve had sent me like a Google trend thing. And I think just some people's interest in real estate, like Steve, didn't it just show that like overall people looking up real estate has gone down over the last little bit?
It's been declining since since 2004 or something. Like, it's a steady kind of like downhill loss of interest since that time. So I think you're going to see that. Obviously, we kind of really kicked off when the market was not doing so hot because we launched this in 2022, right? So I think you got a big growth bump there. I also will tell you, I think Spotify is doing a pretty good job right now, because a couple weeks ago, our Spotify numbers were almost the same as our YouTube numbers, which was always like 10 times the other way. So I will say, though, something's going on there. Tom, you might be right. We do have to ask people to subscribe to the channel if we want them to subscribe to the channel. So please do that. And Dan's channel as well.
Does make a difference. And I'll say we're all about pivoting here. So for the next 20 minutes, this is now not a real estate podcast. This is a tariff podcast. And do you know why? Because all of us and everyone on Twitter, or I guess now X, is now an expert in tariffs. So Dan, I mean, are you having clients asking you what's going on here? And just to be clear, like when we're recording this, at any point, this could change. So we're talking about what we understand today. But, obviously it's on pause now until March 1st. Are these conversations coming up with people, and are they stopping them from making decisions in today's real estate market?
Yeah, what I'm seeing out here now is it's almost similar feeling to the early COVID days, where people are just like, whoa, what is going on? Let's just freeze. And I think that's going to be a bit of the sentiment for at least probably the next 30 days if we stay within a pause type of element, as to like, nobody really has an understanding of where this is going to go or not. And so they're just like, wait and see. Let's just hold back. Are the tariffs going to come in a week, tomorrow, a month, a year? And then if they do come into effect, do they stay a day, a week, a month, a year, forever? And of course, that then translates into, what is that going to mean to obviously the economy, but my job, the consumer's job. So realistically, it's a guessing game right now. And the immediate reaction, like I said, is a freeze.
Yeah. Steve, are you finding that? Because I just had one actually where we had an offer on one of our properties, and I thought it was a reasonable number, but the buyer was just stuck. They weren't coming up no matter what we did. And it was like, okay, it's in front of us. My seller had motivation to get going. And I had kind of said, I had thought back to, remember when that first 25 rate increase happened? And you're like, don't worry, like it's not going to change things. And then everything changed so fast. And I was having this like PTSD. I was like, do I tell this seller that tariffs aren't going to make a difference? Or should I say like, listen, I don't know what this could mean. It's probably not going to end well if they actually go into place. Maybe we should just take this offer and get this wrapped up before the unknown happens. Like, Steve, are you finding that right now?
I think you have to educate your client right now, specifically on the selling side. And you need to go, okay, well, what do you think is going to happen? Because all the research, in air quotes, that I've done, which is YouTube and news articles and whatnot, says basically, if these things do come in, we're going to see the great financial crisis in Canada type numbers of, let's say, negative GDP of over 3.5%. And then we're going to see counter tariffs, which could drop that to over 5% negative. If that's the case, we're going to see prices drop. Like there's just no, like it's going to happen. So if you're in the camp of the big orange angry man is going to smash Canada, then you better sell now, right? Like if you're in that camp. The question is, are you in that camp? And I'll highlight a few things. I want to ask Dan what he's seeing, because Vancouver and Surrey are definitely different markets right now. And they may have different reaction. But I'll come back to the positive side of it. So let's doom and gloom it up for the YouTube algorithm right now a little bit and look at, okay, so if these things do come in, Dan, what do you think happens?
Yeah, well, I think we're in a world where, especially in Canada and absolutely in Toronto and Vancouver, it's this world where like the cost of housing just cannot get a break. You know what I mean? It's just every angle you turn, there's more taxes, there's more expenses. It's just an ever increasing expense that gets passed on to the consumer. And I think the biggest effect that we would see is, of course, the cost of construction. There's going to be tariffs on some key building elements, including, windows, drywall, HVAC systems, appliances, hardware, steel. And all of those are understandably going to be passed on to the consumer. They're going to see an increased price almost out of the gate and just have further impact on housing costs for the foreseeable future, right? That may never be reversible. So I think that's going to be the most pronounced thing that we're going to feel. And interestingly, Steve, I want to add to your earlier comment about sort of the search for homes kind of decreasing. I'm not sure if you guys use it, but rew.ca, obviously a big search platform for real estate in Canada. And like when COVID hit, they were one of the first to see searches for homes absolutely spike by like May, June kind of thing. And they're like, what's going on? And then, of course, we all know that happened after that, basically record-breaking home sales as far as volumes goes. What they're seeing now is literally the day of Trump's inauguration. It's almost a straight line down as far as home search inquiries goes in Vancouver. So that's kind of a notable frame up as to what might happen moving forward here. Now, again, it's only a couple of weeks of data, so way too early to call any type of real trend. But I did find that a notable element of what's happening locally.
But everybody I'm hearing in Vancouver right now that's working Vancouver, Burnaby, Richmond, North Van even, they all seem to be thinking that the market's actually pretty positive, when me out in the valley, I'm not seeing positivity in most spots. So it has Vancouver picked up now, or in like actual sales? I know listings are obviously headed upwards, but everybody seems to be pretty positive from Vancouver proper.
Gotcha. Well, they might be looking in the wrong direction. And what I mean by that is, sure, the January stats just came out and they really like to push the HPI, right? The sort of smoothed out price metric. And interestingly, after we saw the HPI price in GVRD in Greater Vancouver drop for 7 months in a row, it actually increased in January, which is completely, I'd say, misrepresentative of what's actually happening in more real time. Because the HPI, it lags about 3 months, right? And if you look back, median price increased the last 3 months, average price increased the last couple of months. So sure, of course, HPI is just now catching up. But behind that, we saw median prices get absolutely slapped, if you will. They dropped $80,000 last month, which is huge. It's actually the single largest drop in median prices we've seen in like 18 months. And it brings that metric in pricing all the way back to August of 2023. And then average prices did something similar as well. They dropped like 70,000. But average prices today, if you take a snapshot, they're actually the lowest they've been in 2 years, going back to February 2023. So is that positive? I mean, it's positive if you're thinking about buying and you're waiting for a price drop, I guess. And outside of that, sure, we saw home sales. It did increase, right? Year over year. I think it went up something like 14%. 9% higher than last year. But again, you pull back and you look at that big picture and we're still trending well below that 10-year average, which I think is a more important metric to reference.
What
like 11%.
What a tale though. Like, I can't believe you're saying this, because everything you're saying, and I'm 2 cities over from you, is completely the opposite. So our sales are down in the valley. Our average price is spiking upwards, multiple like 7-8% up per month, and then our benchmark is staying very flat. So even though we're in the downwards market, our average price is skyrocketing. You're in what sounds like maybe a better market, and your average price is tanking.
I have an Ontario question here, Steve. Is that just because the detached homes are selling in your market and the condos are sitting there? So that's just pushing up the average price because just bigger homes are actually selling?
Hey, real estate agents, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Are you proud of your current website? If there's any hesitation in your answer, what I want you to do is go to realtyninja.com/Tom. They provide amazing websites for the real estate industry at an affordable cost. Steve has been using them for over a decade. realtyninja.com/Tom.
I don't know, actually. No, because I was looking at detached in particular. I do think there are folks now that are looking at lower rates and going, okay, house prices have come down, so now I'm able to act on higher price stuff. So I think there is more higher priced activity going on. Condos are getting smashed. Like, I just put out a video on my channel this week of how I think for an investor in a certain buildings in Wally right now, your cash flow is down to like negative $200 a month in certain spots.
What a spin. What a realtor spin.
No, but I have plenty of investors that'll negative cash flow $200 a month. When it was $1,200 a year and a half ago, that was a different topic, right? When it was $1,000, that was a different topic because you weren't even covering the principal. Now you're getting $300-400 a month principal being paid. So I don't know, like I'm seeing such volatility, but as Dan was mentioning, there are definitely people that are holding off I want to say there's definitely people that are terrified. And as a result, I think we're going to start to see pent up demand. And then even kind of lead towards the fact that how new house builds start going up so crazy, right? If new house builds go up and we don't get houses being built, are we right back into the housing crunch in 2-3 years from now?
Yeah, I think so. It might take longer than even 2-3 years, but I mean, you start looking at that year 4, year 5, at least based on shovels in the ground today, and yeah, there's significant sort of red flags that are waving down there right now. So I think it's something that needs to turn around pretty quick here. Otherwise, that, like you said, future crisis will be not averted.
I'm sure someone's already said this, but I think we should coin this now on the show. We are tariff-fied. Okay, that's how we're thinking about the market. But so it's interesting, right? Because on both, I'm a dad now, so I have permission to make jokes like that. On both sides, it's like, okay, the cost of construction goes up, meaning that the price, if they choose to build it to the end consumer, goes up. But then if the tariffs go in, the resale properties on the market theoretically should go down in price. Mm-hmm. So it's this weird thing, and then I guess it makes sense, right? It's like if they don't build it, then eventually in maybe 5 years, that's when you're going to start seeing the issue in the market in the future once kind of this all washes through.
I don't know. It's tough. It's so tough right now. Like, let's shift. I don't want to be all doom and gloom. Let's talk about the positivity. Okay, let's talk about the positive sides of what could happen here. One, they may not even come in.
Right.
That's possible, right? We may positively, I mean, I know Tom was looking at the super positive side because he immediately fled to Florida for this episode as soon as it was all announced, right? So I just want to let you know the red is on behind me here for a reason. Dan and I are both in Canada, and we didn't chicken out, and we didn't just defect immediately.
All right. I had to visit the in-laws with the kids, and someone had to help the American economy, right?
Did you illegally cross the border, Tom, or did you do it legally?
Can we go back to that? Because we're all talking about tariffs and what it will do for real estate prices, because that's what we do and that's what we understand. If you actually strip it back, and I'm not taking a political side here, but like the reason that we had the proposed tariffs is because they want to stop drugs and people illegally crossing the border. Regardless of where you are politically, is that a bad thing? That's not bad, is it? That seems totally reasonable, wherever you stand.
I agree. They're putting a spotlight on an issue that obviously needs to be dealt with at a much higher degree. So yes, in a sense, that's absolutely positive. If fentanyl in both countries, all countries, is reduced for public consumption and accessibility, 100% obviously in favor of that. So there's one positive. We can certainly look at what's coming from here. And I think what else is this has also shone a big light on sort of Canada's vulnerabilities, right? And maybe that trading partner is too big of a trading partner. And so it sounds like they're starting to explore other options, other avenues, how to become more Canada independent, if you will. And again, just have better trading partners so that, we're just not exposed as much, right? We can mitigate some of this risk moving forward and strengthen our abilities to be a bit more independent or be allowed to cut off certain regions, right? Let's not just take the U.S. as the only option that might go south here, that, Canada says, okay, great. Well, let's look at a 20, 30-year forecast here. And how do we create and how do we have a stronger economy based on mitigating risks of not being exposed to just, again, one or two countries?
Does this not somewhat allow us as a country to actually maybe reset? Like just what you said, like look at what our options are and not just rely on our biggest, friendliest neighbor up to this point, but actually reset things.
That's what I think the positivity is. Like,
right?
Okay. I don't know if you noticed, Tom, Dan, I don't know if you watch, not a big fan of Trudeau. I am going to tell you that I don't think many people are. That speech that he gave on that Saturday night about the counter tariffs was the best speech that guy's made since 2015, right? It was a uniting factor, believe him or not. And then, so you've got, other politicians I'm not a big fan of. David Eby's talking about we're going to eliminate U.S. alcohol, but only out of red states, which is stupid. Like eliminate all the U.S. alcohol if you're going to do it, right? But that's fine. And then David Eby, 2 days ago, says we're fast tracking now in BC 18 energy and mining projects. we're going to fast track them because guess what? David Eby just realized we need to get LNG to the coast so we can sell it to other places so we can actually have an economy that doesn't rely on the States, right? So that in itself can create, I believe they said an estimated 8,000 jobs in BC. So if tariffs come in, we lose jobs. If tariffs come in, we create new jobs so we can be self-sufficient in the future. So let's shine some positivity on it. And I don't think it's all bad. I'm just kind of put out that we had to have an idiot from outside of the country point out to our politicians that they should care about our country. That's the part I'm a little bit miffed about, right?
Yeah, you can take it as a win, ultimately. Do you know what I mean? It's like you get that shock to the system wherever it comes from. It does allow you to recalibrate. And, I'm a huge believer that Canada vastly underutilizes its natural resources. And I think this has given them a bit of that kick in the butt to say, okay, wait a minute, we really need to start tapping into this. And maybe some of the people who have that power to do that will get put into further power and, make us more energy independent. And of course, use it as an export, right? We could be a vastly richer country by utilizing what's under the ground.
I don't know about you guys, but even really since the pandemic started, there's been this divide in Canada that personally, for me at least, I've never really felt. I've always been so proud. Like I have a Canada flag hanging at my cottage. Like I am Canadian to my core. Like I love this country. But then when the pandemic happened, it divided a lot of people. Steve, I don't know if we talk about the trucker stuff, if we're going to get shadow banned on this YouTube channel, but the fact that they froze people's bank accounts is insanity. And that was the one moment in my life that I was like, I've always been so proud of the Canadian flag. Is now flying a Canadian flag on your car like seen as a bad thing? I actually had that. This maybe like a crazy thought, but nothing brings someone together like a common enemy. Every sequel of every movie, the enemy from the first movie teams up with the good guy from the first movie because they've got a bigger enemy to take on, right? And that kind of feels like this is season 2 of Canada. We've now got a common enemy. We're finally agreeing. Steve just said he enjoyed a speech that Trudeau gave. Normally he's saying that guy can't put 3 sentences together, right? So it is kind of interesting. And maybe if we are going to be positive about it, this could be a wonderful thing for Canada because we're not becoming the 51st state. It's not happening. This is a great country, and it's not. There's no way. You really honestly believe deep down it's possible?
And I'm sorry you had to come in on this episode, but give me a second. I actually think there is a very good chance that at least economically, that guy wants to take over this country. Because one thing I know is that guy does generally say what he means, even in a stupid way. And I can see him looking at Putin going like, oh, he's annexing parts of different countries. I'm a big tough guy too. To his point, I think we're squandering Alberta's energy and Saskatchewan's energy. So if he's looking at it going, well, if they're not going to use it, maybe we should use it. So I think I'm a little bit terrified that the actual end game is to annex Canada. I legitimately, but that might not be actually changing the flag. It may just be financially. So there's that possibility.
What I was actually wondering, Dan, is as I was watching the tweets come in over the last few weeks, and even that him say like, hey, well, why can't American banks come to Canada? Like he's slowly figuring out all these different things, which are some of them like reasonable thoughts. No one said anything about the fact that Americans are banned from buying Canadian real estate. They haven't quite figured that one out yet. Like, I'm shocked one of our things wasn't like remove the foreign buyer ban for Americans because you got so many snowbirds in Florida. I don't know. That was kind of surprising to me. Like, do you think we've been talking about foreign buyer a little bit on the show recently where we didn't talk about for a while? Do you think it's now realistic that kind of quietly it's removed at some point and doesn't stay in place till the end of 27?
Well, we look at all the levers that the powers that be have to be able to essentially modify, manipulate Canadian home prices. And the foreign buyer one, I mean, we had it to the extreme here in around 2015, 2016. It was a problem, realistically, how much it was being pumped up. And it was coincided with a lot of money laundering and whatnot. But to stay on the foreign buyer, yeah, of course, currently there's a ban. And should we see Canadian prices, or maybe obviously Ontario and BC prices, fall to a certain degree, I firmly believe that they might loosen those regulations to start stimulating it again. We know more or less that the government do want to keep prices for homes in Canada essentially propped up, right? The vast majority of Canadians are homeowners and have their equity in it, and it's a lot of their retirement plans. And love it or absolutely hate it, it's the reality that we live in, and so it is being protected. So yeah, I could see that being absolutely one of the levers that is pulled to say, look, we got to get home prices going again. Let's say foreign buyer ban has been removed. So by 27, for sure, it could happen before that.
Vancouver's always been looked at as kind of if there was one spot in Canada that foreign buyers did the biggest amount of damage in terms of creating demand and pushing up prices, it was Vancouver. So you've been working in that market for the last 8 years. Do you think that's legit? We now have proof to say okay, yeah, prices were higher specifically because the people coming in weren't Canadians with Canadian jobs. It was outside money just buying up these properties.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at Sam Cooper's book, and I've just read that one a couple months ago, and he went deep dive on this and uncovered a lot of what was happening with the foreign money coming into it. And I think you can probably tell I'm a bit of an analytical personality. So, you just look at the data, and most of that money was flooding into West Vancouver, and it was coming in 2015, 2016. And literally prices in that luxury market have not realized those prices again. Right? We're at in 8 years, and they still haven't hit the peak of when all that foreign capital was flowing into those areas. So I think that really, really demonstrates how much of an impact that foreign capital had.
Do you think it was just buying the luxury though? Were they buying the average sale price single family home, or were they just pushing up a percentage of the market that was already expensive anyways? Does that make sense? Were they doing damage on the average Vancouver person buying a house, or just the luxury stuff?
I'm going to, again, defer to probably Mr. Cooper's book here. And it largely was on the luxury side, right? They were moving big volumes of money. You're not going to be able to launder or see huge increases if you're buying $300,000 condos compared to a $10 million detached. So yeah, it was predominantly, from what I can tell and what I've researched, it was almost 80, 90% in that luxury high-end market.
I always like to do real life examples on this show. So for all three of our markets, I'd like to do this, and we'll talk about what we've seen so far in 2025 for buyers or sellers listening. So in Vancouver, in the market that you work, give me a breakdown of I know realtors don't really do rentals there, but are rental prices realistically dropping? What's going on in the condo sector? For the freehold property types, what price point is moving? What is sitting? What is the average Canadian that's thinking about making a move in your market would need to know at this point in time?
Sure. It's a lot of questions there. So let me try to dissect them all. Let's look at the condo market, because I know, that's getting a lot of the headlines in your neighborhood in Toronto right now. So Vancouver, yes, you look at the downtown market, which probably similar to Toronto is where most of the activity goes. And that's obviously the majority of the investor market. So downtown Vancouver condos, I mean, they saw prices go up and to the right for, a decade and a half until about that same era of 2016, 2017. Condo prices today are at or below where they were 8 years ago.
Wow.
Which is kind of fascinating, because people were just used to that, like I said, up and to the right graph for decades. And then to see it literally just grind to the right for 8 years is pretty fascinating. So it's flat, and I work with a lot of investors, and I will say basically ever since interest rates started rising, the investor looking for a condo in Vancouver, it's almost disappeared entirely. That's not where the money is flowing. There's still people that obviously believe in Canadian real estate and Vancouver real estate, but they're not looking at the condo for being that solution, right?
Where's that money going? Where's that money going that would have gone into the condo sector?
Development.
Hey, podcast listener, if you're looking to buy or sell a property in Surrey or the Fraser Valley, you have to reach out to Steve Karrasch, my co-host. As much as we make fun of each other on this show, the truth is that I do this podcast with him because he is reliable. He has an opinion. He knows what he's doing. He has a ton of experience. And although I have never personally sold a home with Steve, if I were and I was in that area, he would be my number one choice. And let's be honest with each other. As much as he has a hard exterior on the show, he's a little bit of a softie once you get digging a little bit deeper. So you can reach out to Steve. It's link in the description. I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Development.
Okay.
And largely because of the multiplex legislation that came through in Vancouver and BC, last year, that has rezoned, all single family homes to allow for multiple units to be built, 4, 5, 6, depending on location size and proximity to transit. most or a lot of developers are focused on that now. So they just want to pick up land and have it developed because it's the biggest rezoning that we'll probably see in our lifetime. And it really allows people to densify and build homes that are the missing middle, that it's been dubbed, that really are desirable, right? A lot of people maybe don't want to live up in the sky in a small box, but they do want ground level entry home where they can have 2-3 bedrooms, they can raise a family. And so there's a huge desirability for that type of home. So investors are moving their capital out of condos and into buying maybe old dilapidated houses that can then be built up to be multiple units.
And are they building it, them living in one unit and renting out the others, or is it purely a numbers game? This makes sense financially. I'm not moving into this, but I'm going to own this as an investment.
Most of the guys and girls that we're working with are buying it as a straight investment. So there's sort of two sides that are happening. There's the investor who says, like, I'm just here to build homes and hopefully turn a bit of a profit. But then there is the other side, which is the homeowner who's, let's say, lived in a home for 20 plus years. Maybe they're free and clear. And if they were to go and sell it on the open market today, let's just say we'll use East Vancouver, my neighborhood, as an example. And they're in the Vancouver special and they could sell it for $2 million on the open market. Well, there are a bunch of developers in the area here that are saying, look, partner with us. We'll buy your home. We'll take a chunk of the proceeds. Let's say you put $1 million in the bank and then you take another $1 million and you reinvest it back in the development of these multifamily homes. And then we will together benefit from any upside potential from the sale of those. And ultimately, we're seeing some homeowners say, okay, well, look, that $2 million I would have grossed, now I'm seeing 2.5 or 2.6 or more. And there's even one other developer in particular that we've now partnered with. They're just out for the construction contract. They're not even looking to profit from the sale. So they're just looking to get their builders building all the time. And this is allowing homeowners to realize upwards of 7-figure lifts compared to what they would have just sold on the open market. So yeah, you got to wait 2 years. You have to move out of your house, right? It's not like it's a perfect match for everybody, but it's created these new opportunities for homeowners to almost become citizen developers and profit from potential upside of sales.
For our Ontario listeners, can you explain to me exactly what a Vancouver special is? Steve talks about it all the time, but like, what does that actually mean?
Gotcha. Yeah, so Vancouver Special, this was a templated home design that was big in Vancouver. Gosh, what was the era? About 60 years ago. And there was just these architectural plans that were given out. And so people could go to development a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. And they just built these similar looking homes all over Vancouver East, Vancouver West, predominantly on the east side. And they were just known as the Vancouver Special. And there's a whole bunch of them around still. A lot are being torn down, but it's been so long that they actually have a bit of cachet now. And people are going in and maintaining the facade, keeping that look, but then doing a stunning interior redesign or renovation. So that's kind of what the Vancouver Special is.
So if I'm a seller or potential seller this year, next year, and I have the Vancouver Special, am I thinking to myself, I could just cash out and sell this to another family that's maybe going to do some interior renos and move in, and maybe that's retirement, maybe that's putting that into something else in investments? Or do I wait and the only buyer I want is one of these developers and I'm willing to wait those 2 years to maximize my potential profits out of it? Like, do we now have proof that not only could you sell it for more, but you're going to make more money in 2-3 years than you would if you just sold it to, Steve and his family who are moving in a month?
It's a great question, Tom. I appreciate that one. So yeah, what's the adoption rate? What's the absorption rate of these type of homes going to be? And the reality is we don't know yet, right? The multiplex plan only came into effect at the end of June of last year. So there are, in Vancouver, for example, over 600 building permits submitted to the city to build multiplex. And some are well under construction today. But the reality is, yes, if you're taking a single family home and you're putting 4, 5, or 6 units on it, is that going to be a desirable type of home for people, right? We know the missing middle, things like a half duplex, probably the most sought after home type right now, right? A lot of people can't afford a full detached, but they can get a detached feel in a duplex and purchase it for, let's say, half the price of what an average detached would be. But now we're taking that same sort of duplex lot, and now we're putting 4 homes on it, right? And some of them are going to be quite livable. They'll be 1,500, 2,000 square feet. Some are going to be a lot smaller. But because we don't have proof of concept yet, we don't really know if people are going to pay the same similar prices, let's say per foot, as they will for the duplex right next door.
Mhm.
So there's an unknown here, but ultimately, the dividing and the deciding factor, I think, is going to be if it's a quality home that's well laid out, good floor plan, good materials in the nice neighborhood, there's going to be a buyer for that. We just don't know what that price per foot is, right? Like, what is it going to be, a 10% less than a half duplex because you've got 3 extra neighbors and maybe no garage? So we're going to see. It's all going to, sort of hash out over the next few months here as people are trying to pre-sell these multifamily units on the open market.
Are these zone strata then? Are they individually deeded? Like if there was a house and now you're building 6, is it one deed and then you rent out the other 5? Or are these actual zoned as if they were like condos, but just 1 or 2 levels?
Yeah, individually, the strata. You can sell 1,
Okay.
2, 3, all. Yeah. You get your own title, everything.
Yeah, I think you can do it either way, Tom. Like if you really wanted to build a 4-unit apartment building and have one title, I believe technically the BC government, anyway, when we had Ravi on, said he would be totally open to that. Just more housing is what matters. So it's now going to be apparently up to the developer to decide what they want. So Dan, my question for you, and maybe I'll kind of give you my train of thought first. So I don't do a ton in Vancouver. Occasionally we'll do the some Vancouver stuff. One of my agents on my team is from East Van, so very familiar with the area, does our East Van work. When I see this stuff, I mean, a lot of this was already there because you had plenty of duplexes before, even front back duplexes, Tom, as opposed to like a side-by-side
Right.
semi, right? But for, I want to say 10 years now or more, developers in East Van have been assembling 2 or 3 or 4 unit or lots together and then building basically small walk-up apartment buildings, right? So you have, let's call it a basement level that's got a 2-bedroom apartment, the middle level, and then you actually have staircase on the outside that goes up to a 3rd level, and you can build another unit up there. They all have garages in the back alley because Vancouver's built off of a back alley system. Is this amplifying that? Is it changing that? Because it seemed to me that's the way a lot of East Vancouver was going at that time, is to get these kind of mini apartment 10 to 16 unit little apartment buildings going. Or is this now going to make that assembly of those lots completely irrelevant?
The biggest change, so actually maybe I'll back up a second. So I live in East Vancouver and I live in a triplex. Okay, and it's about 6, 7 years old now. So yes, multifamily in that sense, it has existed and builders have been building it for sometimes decades, right? But the biggest change that's happened is that they're pre-zoned now. So when a developer came in, they bought a lot, it was single family, the time and money to rezone that to even be a triplex was quite prohibitive. So that's the biggest change. Now you can come in, tear down that house, you're already zoned for, let's say, 4 units. So the time and money saved there allows developers to get building a lot quicker. When it comes to land assemblies and building, like you said, sort of stick frame low rise, that's essentially the same. I mean, yeah, there's some TOA stuff, but I don't want to kind of open up that can of worms. But ultimately, that element of being able to assemble and build multifamily low rise, it's essentially the same. They still have to go through the assembly process and get all the homeowners to agree on a price, and then they have to still rezone and then to do all the permitting there as well. So that's not changing as much, but the single family to allow for 4 to 6 per lot, that's the biggest change that we're experiencing. And that's why we're seeing so many developers going in. Like I said, 600 permits, maybe it doesn't sound that big, but I mean, that's 3,000 odd units that we're going to see that builders want to build today in Vancouver.
So now let's think of if I'm a buyer, if I'm a first time home buyer, and let's fast forward here 5 years, a lot of these are done, and I'm pre-approved. I want to get into the market. I want to buy my own space. I don't want to rent. I have an option of buying a traditional condo, right, in a tower, or I could buy one of these units. Do you think these units are now going to have higher demand than your traditional condo based on where they're located?
I definitely do. Yeah, the demand we've already seen, right? It's like I said, you look at areas, especially East Van, just because they're very common here. You look at prices just for one metric. If you go to most of East Vancouver, duplex prices right now are at all-time high. Okay, so a lot of people like to reference the peak that we saw in 2022, and it has obviously come down generally in most areas. But you take my neighborhood, for example, I'm in Mount Pleasant East. duplexes, sort of these multifamily, they're at all-time highs. But then you just go over to condos and they're like 3% below all-time. And then you go to detached is like 9% below all-time. So that speaks to the desirability. But at the end of the day, pricing is pricing, and a 2-bedroom condo is going to be $1 million, and you want to move up to this 3-bedroom half duplex. Well, now you're looking at 1.5-ish, right? So it's a 50% higher price point. So I think that's going to be the barrier ultimately, because they're not really building 1 or 2-bedroom, multifamily. It's going to be straight to the 3s and 4s.
That's what I was going to ask. So they're only building the bigger ones. Like, we're not now going to have in 5 years from now people complaining about the fact that all these, used to be homes were turned into 600 square foot 1+ dens. You're actually building 3 bedrooms pretty much for everything. Is that what you're seeing?
That's exactly right. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you got it. Because people, again, it's become the new single family home in a sense, right? So people can buy a half duplex and get 3 or 4 bedrooms and raise a family there. That's kind of become the norm, if you will. And again, love it or hate it, that's the I guess price prohibitive environment we live in. And sure, a lot of those might want that detached home, but that detached home they want is $3 million. And they can't maybe afford that, right? But they can afford a nice 3-bedroom, 3-bed, 4-bath, half duplex with a little yard near the school that they want, and get into that for 1.5. And that's kind of become the new family home.
I'm always interested when we have guests on the show that I don't know personally, but that are very in tune with what's actually happening in the market. In the last 5 years, have you made any real estate moves personally or for investment purposes? And if so, why?
Yeah, appreciate it. And yeah, absolutely. And I'm still a condo investor. And
Okay.
the last 2 I purchased, I bought I bought the home I'm in now in 2021. And in 2020, right around the same time, I bought a pre-sale condo in the city of Langford, which is on Vancouver Island. And the reason I targeted Langford was, one, I had a close relationship with the developer, and 2, very pro building government in place there, right? They were just pro-growth heavy, and it's done incredibly well over there. It's an area that just demonstrates that if you want to bring in pro-growth policies for both housing and for jobs, typically, people go where jobs grow, right? That's the old adage from investors. And so that one is just kind of done well, and it's churning away. And then also my fiance is, she works for a big developer here in BC as well. And we went in on another condo just the end of last year.
Okay.
And again, when you're in the industry, you've got your ear to the ground. So when you're getting a good deal and the right floor plan and when you have first access, it gave us a reason that we thought, yeah, this looks like a good, safe option.
So now let me push on this, because I think this is interesting. We had just had, by the way, you're a rare species right now, the condo investor. I can see a documentary on this in the future. We have to protect them because there's so few of them. A lot of people that aren't buying that condo, at least resale right now, those investors have gone to development. So what made you, at the end of last year, we're not talking about 21, 22 and everything was crazy. What made you go, you know what, I'm going to put my money into a pre-sale. I believe this one's going to work out better than the other places you could have put your money?
Yeah, it was access and trust in the developer. So there was a pre-existing relationship there. It wasn't even so much the asset class as it was the belief in the area, the region, and the developer. So it was just an easy thing to do in that sense.
Got it.
I will shift this a bit though and talk about what I'm investing in next. And that is definitely on the development side. So we look at the city of Burnaby here, which is just one municipality to the east of where I am in Vancouver. And they've adopted this Bill 44 the most liberally. They were actually well on their way to having their own when the legislation got pushed down. So they were just like, yeah, great, we're ready to go. One of the biggest things that they've done in the city of Burnaby is remove the requirement for a development permit. You actually go straight to building permit. And that is a huge time and cost savings. And so you go in and you buy your single family lot and you tear down the house and you put on 4 to 6 units. And again, we're targeting something that's close to a frequent transit network, meaning a bus that comes every 15 minutes or more. That means you're automatically zoned for 6 units on that lot. And I don't want to say partnered up, but we're very close, have a great relationship with a modular company. And I'm exploring modular homes very seriously because I'm an advocate of that type of technology and believe that they've gotten to the point where the quality of a modular is at or even better than some of the stick builds that are available today. So we're building a bit of a team here to buy that lot and put on the modular homes and then basically sell those at what should be
Cheaper.
less than sort of market value. Yes. And the main reason is, of course, these modular homes can be ordered and placed, locked up and finished in about 8 weeks compared to, 18 months for stick build. So that time savings obviously equals a cost savings, which we're looking to pass on to the consumer as well.
Do you think the cost savings for the consumer would be enough for them to take the risk on, I don't know how many people live in modular homes right now in BC. I'm sure it's not a very high percentage to say, yes, we're going to do this versus the traditional type of property I would have been used to buying previously.
Right. Again, we don't know. Proof of concept, right?
Yeah.
So the way that you establish this,
you're the guinea pig on this one.
Yeah. Well, hey, someone's got to go first, right? But no, I think what's happened here is we're far from first. I mean, there's a lot of laneway homes in Vancouver that are quote unquote modular, and there's a ton of cabins on, let's say, the Sunshine Coast. And so they're becoming more common. They're becoming more favorable. And I think, going from, let's say, a laneway house to a primary, it's not the biggest shift. And I think we're very close to seeing that shift happen.
Aren't you worried in Burnaby about their development fees? I heard that they're $100,000 a door.
Hey folks, if you're looking for a real estate agent in the city of Toronto, let's face it, you gotta call my buddy Tom Storey of the Storey team and Royal LePage Signature in Toronto, Ontario. They're your obvious choice because Tom is not just the co-host of this podcast. No, he is a real life and top producing real estate agent in the city of Toronto. There's nobody out there that knows the condo market better than Tom and his team in downtown, but they do service the entire city of Toronto and any of your residential real estate needs. So if you're looking for an agent, do not hesitate to reach out to Tom, book a call with him using the link down below in the description of this podcast, and let Tom guide you through your real estate journey. And now back to the podcast.
They're close. So I work with a developer who just shared his exact fees because he just got his final BP or building permit approval. And fees came out to, about $70,000 a door. They're incredibly high. There's no doubt about it. But developers know their numbers, and ultimately, you're going to have your fixed costs and your variable costs. And what ends up being the variable cost often is the land. So it's the land prices that are actually getting pushed down the most to almost compensate for all the fees and taxes that it takes to build a home, right? I think it's pretty similar in Toronto. What are we, 33% of the total cost of building a new home is taxes and fees. So yes, the fees are incredibly high. And as we know, where do they go? They get passed on, right? The developer's not going to eat that cost, so they get passed on. And I think maybe another metric to recognize is just like Vancouver with their high fees, they've got their 600 plus odd developer permits or development permits. And in Burnaby, it's somewhere around 300 right now. And, these developers aren't submitting permits to rush out and lose money. Okay. Like the pro formas still work. And the margins are razor thin, but the marketplace looks to be supporting them enough that we can still build to a degree, right? I think we're obviously underbuilding, but I think that demonstrates that while fees are incredibly high, and I think that's the first thing that should be removed to help affordability in our country, ultimately, they work, and we just kind of grind on because the people still are moving here and need nice quality new homes.
Maybe that's a good thing and a bad thing. The city knows they're still getting the permit, so they're like, we don't have to decrease these fees yet because people are still, even if the margins are thinner than before. I'd like to know your thoughts on, we've had Ravi, your housing minister, on the show twice. Steve, nice. I feel like is 50-50 on Ravi depending on the week. And now that enough
I love Ravi as a person, human being. I just don't like him as the policymaker.
Now that enough time has passed, Dan, I'd say it sounds like because you're in the development space, are you pro most of what Ravi has done?
Ravi's been minister since December of 2022, and for somebody who, I guess, his mandate is affordability, and since he's been in that position, home prices are up 6%. But obviously one person can't fix housing, not even close, right? We've got teams of people that are trying to figure it out. So, he just had an interview on January 31st, and the big question, of course, of the DCCs and CACs, essentially the city development fees, came into question, and he did not have a very solid answer, in my opinion. I haven't read the whole interview, but from what I could tell, he was just like, yeah, they keep going up and we're still looking into them. We're trying. So I'll be honest, I don't know much of his policies outright, so I can't comment on it too much. But I think what I did want to share when it does sort of come to governments and housing is our mayor, Ken Sim. He campaigned on something that he called the 3331 permit approval framework. Okay. And this has actually been adopted by the Vancouver City Council as of June of 2023. And what that means, to share with everybody, 33331 means it only takes 3 days to get approval for a renovation permit, 3 weeks to approve a single family home permit, 3 months for multifamily, and then a year for high rise. Okay, so this is enacted and has been enacted in city council here for about 18, 19 months. And I will share that 3 months for a approval permit on multifamily is far from reality. It's still upwards of like 8 or 9. So here you have, again, a legislation that was campaigned on, enacted, and it's just not actually viable. It's not happening today. So, I'm sure Ravi's heart's in the right place. And again, I can't speak to his policies enough because I haven't researched them, but it's freaking challenging. It's tough, right? You can give all the lip service in the world that you want, but to actually change housing and move this beast of an industry in the right way, it's proving tough time and again.
Steve, where do you fall on this?
I think a lot of the stuff they did was in the right mind. But I just don't know how it's all going to be fixed. Like, I think the density thing that you guys are doing in Toronto is nutso. Like, I think the real solution is wood frame, low rise, quick building. I don't think it's just the
land's too expensive. Even we have very similar
Toronto,
policies.
But you're in like downtown Toronto. Okay, so how many more 75-story condos does Mississauga need?
It's the only thing that, as a developer, it's like, if you're going to spend that much money on the land, you kind of have to build that. You can't build the type of housing people want because you'd lose money for how much the land costs.
Okay, I don't know. I agree with you in downtown maybe Vancouver, downtown Toronto, but like the solution is not a billion trillion everybody live in downtown Toronto or downtown Vancouver, right? Like, we can't have every new immigrant moving to just those two cities. So I know they're trying to expand, but really I think more of the efforts need to be in the diversification of our cities. Like, give other people more options of other places to go, as opposed to, just density is strange because apparently the unit becomes cheaper and the square footage becomes more expensive. So when you do that, you're not actually necessarily making housing cheaper, right? You're just cramming more people into smaller spaces. So it's not necessarily, I think, the right move. I think we should, and this is probably more of a federal thing. No, it's probably provincial because it's real estate related. But I think we should just look at how can we spread everybody out more and create more cities. We are in a shortage of cities in Canada more than we're in a shortage of housing, right? We've got two good options. There's a couple people who be like, I want to live in, 100 Mile House. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's great for a couple of you. But I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, there was a lot of people that moved to Prince George for mill work, right? There just was. There was a ton of people that went. Prince George is the same size now as it was in 1972. So why is that? Well, one is because the weather's terrible, but it's mostly because the jobs aren't there. People will live in that climate, right? So we need to do a better job of spreading this all out, because I don't think any of this is actually going to fix the problem that we're really having. Well,
let me ask Dan this. So we spent a lot of time talking about the fact that people are buying these Vancouver specials and adding more properties to them, and this is great with the new zoning. I know you don't have this exact number, but like, if you actually take a step back and we just look at like, okay, but City of Vancouver, what percentage does that even count to as towards of what's being developed? Like, that is a piece of it, but then what else is actually being built? Is it just condos, purpose-built rentals? Like, what's being built right now?
Yeah, good question. It is largely condos because, of course, that's who has the money is the big developers, and they're going to see the highest return, off of that piece of land that they've purchased by going as high as possible. And we keep seeing higher and higher permit approvals for these concrete towers, right? 50, 60, 65 stories kind of thing are starting to become the norm here, right? Every time there's a new tower launched, it's the new record-breaking tallest one on the West Coast. And again, it's just about ROI, let's be honest, right? But I think, again, what they're trying to do with this legislation is allow for a lot more builders to bring that missing middle, which is a bit more desirable housing type, that ground level entry, to the marketplace. And it takes time, of course, but we're seeing the initial results of it, and it does seem promising in that sense. So yeah, if we have all these single family zone lots across most of Vancouver, those are now allowed to be multifamily at least, right? So it's a beginning.
Are the developers for those ones, they're not like the big boys, right? Those are more like the smaller developers that aren't building the condos. Are you getting people fully transitioning from, I used to build a 50-story condo building, now I've got 10 of these under the works at once? Like who's doing it?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of the bigger developers will create, if they don't already, basically a subdivision of their business for multiplex. And the reason is they still have the cost and time elements of 5-6 years sometimes to rezone a property to go up, those 50, 60 stories. And that's very expensive. And, we've all seen the headlines this year of how many towers or even larger developers, have gone insolvent. It's a hard, tough, thin margin business. Whereas, you go into, again, something like Burnaby, and you can go from land acquisition to handing over the keys in 24, 36 months. That's a much quicker turnaround on your money. So we're going to see that your single family home and your townhome developers move into multiplex. That's already taking place for sure. We know a whole bunch of them. But yeah, I agree. I think the bigger developers who are used to doing their concrete, they're going to look at this as an option, right? Because sure, they're not going to do one or two. They might do a parcel 50 or something, whatever the number is, and realize that they can get their money in and out in a much quicker and less prohibitive and less risky asset class.
You got to go where the demand is too, right? If are pre-sale condos selling right now in Vancouver? Because they sure as hell ain't selling in Toronto. Like, is anyone buying them at $1,300 a square foot? Like, what's happening?
Again, my fiance is in that industry, and I have a colleague that works at Altus Group as well. So I get a lot of intel into the pre-sale market here, and it's obviously struggling. It's tough, right? When the market dips, pre-sale is one of the first to disappear. So it's been hard, but it's not dead, and it's nowhere near as slow as Toronto. We did a sort of a year-end wrap up on our channel at the end of December there, and we did examine the pre-sale numbers, and sure, they're off 20-25%, but they're far from let's say the issues that you guys are experiencing.
Yeah, it is not great in the city of Toronto. We had I feel like, I don't know if I talked about this last week, Steve, so I apologize to the viewer if I did, but we had a lunch, and we had the guy that owns our company come and sit down. He's like, I just got back from a meeting with one of the biggest developers in the city, and without hesitation, that developer was like, it's going to take 3 years for interest to come back for us to be able to build these things and sell them at the development fees included and what we paid for the land. It's a 3-year waiting game at this point, and they're willing. Wow. They're willing to wait. Our favorite economist on this show is Doug Porter. I know you've spoken to him many times as well. The mortgage renewal question, I feel like I've asked every guest we've ever had on this podcast, when's it finally going to break? Is the cliff actually here? Now that fixed and variable are in the mid-4s or slightly lower than that. What was your conversation with Doug like on that? And we'll have him back on the show soon. And then your own personal conversation with clients. Are people worried about the renewals coming up this year?
Yeah, this is a topic I really enjoy. And yeah, we just had Doug on a couple of weeks ago, so really good timing right after the most recent rate cut announcement. And he was actually, when we interviewed him a year ago, he was almost more concerned about 2024 and people's ability to renew then. That's obviously when rates were a bit higher. And so he says, yeah, it's basically gone from a cliff to a speed bump. And I completely agree with him. And he said a couple points that I'll share that really kind of framed it up nicely. So yeah, as we know, 50, 60% of all mortgages out there right now are set to renew in the next couple of years. And of course, the pundits love a good real estate bear story. And I guess this is the latest crisis that's going to collapse the Canadian real estate market. But these are probably the same people that were saying that. Remember when we had that mortgage deferral cliff that was going to,
and
crash
the
prices.
trigger rate was supposed to
The
crash
trigger rate
too.
was a big one, right? And here we are, right? Obviously, both of those were ultimately nothing burgers.
Yep.
So I've been watching this and paying close attention to it for a couple of years. And I firmly, even then, 2 years ago, when rates were still 5%, was starting to say that, no, I don't think there's going to be any type of renewal cliff. And a whole bunch of, I guess, data points as to why. So yeah, sure, we're looking at 50% of mortgages are renewing in the next 2 years and absolutely at higher rates. There's no question that people are going to be paying more. It also means that 50% of mortgages have already experienced higher payments. And plus a portion of that upcoming 50% are also paying more too because they had floating variable payments. So they're keeping up with their payments too. When you take the wider picture and you look at Canada as a whole, and this one comes from Doug Porter, there's less than 10% of Canadians who are facing a higher payment. Interesting way of looking at it, right? When you take the people who own outright or are renters, whatever, it's less than 10% of Canadians are facing a higher mortgage payment in the next 2 years. The opposite way of looking at that is 90% of Canadians are not facing an increased mortgage payment. So it's an interesting reference. And I think this is largely demonstrated in the fact that our national arrears rate is 0.21%. So we're still sitting less than where we were pre-pandemic at 0.25%. And when you extrapolate that information even further, we recognize that the provinces with the highest home prices, obviously Ontario, BC, Quebec, they had the lowest arrears rate of nationally, all tied at 0.17%. So, you look at Canadians and it's almost like there's a pride in paying your mortgage here. You know what I mean? Because you look to the States, right? Like to America, their arrears rate today is 7x what Canada is. They're at 1.52%. And you don't hear anything about that, right? It's just the norm down there. They're just cruising along at 1.5%. Imagine if, next month, Canada saw a 700% increase in the arrears rate, it would be headline news everywhere. And every news channel would cover it. And yet that's a reality today in America. And you just don't hear anything, right? It's just no big deal. And also, they're not experiencing any type of a housing collapse if you look at them as a nation as a whole, right? So 1.5, 7x the arrears rate, they're seem to be managing it. I think also to further demonstrate our resilience here in Canada to pay our mortgages in the face of adversity. I mean, look at the global financial crisis and more recently COVID. America's arrears rate shot up to 5%, whereas Canada's barely doubled to 0.45, right? So America was 12x worse than Canada. It's just something that Canadians do. And let's keep in mind, for every dollar of debt that the average Canadian has, they've also got over $6.60 in equity in savings. So let's say things are horrible and they're tough and you're facing a renewal, you simply can't afford that payment, right? And of course, this is reality. We're already seeing it in the marketplace. Well, a couple things to also realize. If you're in GVRD and you're renewing, that means you've probably owned your home for at least 5 years, right? Because you're hitting that 5-year renewal. Well, guess what? Home prices are up 29% in those 5 years. So in GVRD, that's an average of $250,000 of tax-free equity. So if you are forced to sell, you have to leave your house because the payments are too much. You essentially have options, right? And you might not love the options, but it's not like you are going to go out anywhere and live for free. You're paying someone to have a roof over your head, right? So maybe you sell your house and you go buy something else and it's 20 minutes further away than you want to be, but it's the house of your choice, and this is close to my heart because this is happening to people very close to me right now. So it's an absolute reality, but it's not the worst reality. They still get the home that they want. It's just a little bit further out, but it's still their home. Right?
Steve, I just want to say one thing. This is a future title of a podcast episode. Okay. It's going to be February 2027 is the real mortgage cliff, because they're the people that bought in the peak of the market. That's the one we're waiting for. And also, Dan, something that you said that just clicked into me. The whole time this mortgage renewal cliff, in my mind at least, I'm thinking someone had a 2% rate and they're going to a mid 4% rate today. What percentage of the people renewing the mortgage were on a variable rate anyways? I don't know the answer to that. They've already taken a smack in the face for the last 2 years, right?
That's right. Yeah,
it's interesting.
Well, Tom, I got a heart out here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I can wrap this up pretty quick here because it's another thing that not too many people are talking about. But let's consider this: since rates, the overnight rate hit like 3.25% back in September of 2022, there was over 1 million homes that have sold since then. And guess what? Rates are lower today than when those homes were bought. So technically, there's 1 million homeowners that are saying, "Great, I love where rates are today. It's actually I'm paying less than I did." So there's a cohort there that is not very often discussed. And don't get me wrong, I'm very aware of how much pain is in the landscape right now, and I'm not discrediting any of that. But I do believe there will be no such thing as a mortgage renewal cliff.
Dan, you're a perfect guest because we started the show with doom and gloom. We got them hooked, and then we remained, neutral, and then we positive it at the end. I know that's not a word, but that's exactly what we did.
Oh, I'm going to positive it a little bit more because, I got to go. So I got 2 points, and then Tom, we can just cut it off. Any guess on the last time 5-year bond yields were this low?
2019? I don't know. 20.
Dan's looking it up. Look,
I'm literally Googling it. Yeah.
January 2022?
April 10th, 2022.
Okay.
Wow. So we are now coming down below peak market buyers and bond yields and switching to the fixed rate from the variable or back and forth or whatnot. I do have to go. I do want to point out that I didn't realize this until right now, and we are proudly representing the red, white, and blue in today's episode. So go America, tariffs, and
Steve, you can jump off if you want, but Dan, for people listening that want to go find out more about you and your show, where do they go?
Yeah, thanks so much. Very simple. Just jump on YouTube or Google us. We are the Vancouver Life Real Estate Group. It'll definitely pop up for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. It was great to meet you in this fashion. I hope you'll come back on the show in the future. Steve, I hope you have a above average day. Dan, I hope you have a great day. All the listeners, I hope you have an amazing day. We will see you next week. Bye.